Story 1. No, not anymore. It's a mix of two factors. Firstly, I have different priorities now, and trying to find a relationship isn't one of them. Secondly, I have too much trauma from previous relationships that I haven't dealt with yet. Therefore, I am unwilling to approach women and take that path. Story 2. There are fewer women who are approachable in settings where I can interact with them compared to university. Additionally, the principle of not mixing personal and professional relationships becomes more significant at work as time goes on. The ability to engage in casual relationships with coworkers and move on when complications arise is typically a young man's experience. Story 3. Never approached consistently. Many of the relationships I had in the past developed naturally. Although some were unconventional, they ultimately became significant. Just be yourself, don't do anything reckless, and live life as if nothing extraordinary is going to happen. It's a tough mindset, but pursue other goals as well, so that finding someone becomes just another item checked off your list when the time is right. Story 4. It's almost never. I find it hard to be truly interested at first sight when I know nothing about the other person. Story 5. I exhausted myself from dating in my 20s. Now I prioritize peace and freedom during my free time. Story 6. It has gone from a few times when I felt overconfident to not at all. I have been burned too many times and I do not have the energy to chase anymore. If you are referring to a cold approach, I literally never do it. However, I am a typical Reddit user who fears and distrusts human interaction, so this may not be the most objective perspective. Story 7. Like most other humorous responses here, yes, the same not at all. Why would I? The idea of cold approaching someone based solely on the intention of dating, in whatever form that takes, and largely making a decision based on nothing other than appearance, honestly comes off as unpleasant to me. Story 8. I love these Reddit threads where answers come exclusively from people the question doesn't apply to. My answer is that I am a bit of a late bloomer, so I didn't really start reaching out for dates until my late 20s. I'm also only 30 now, but based on my trend, I think I will probably continue to improve. Story 9. Yes and no. When I was anxious and inexperienced, I wanted to pursue relationships, but I didn't very much. Now I'm comfortable, but it's also not as novel anymore, and it feels somewhat tedious. I prefer not to bother. Pursuing relationships can be one of the most thankless jobs. Story 10. I don't use the apps anymore either. Years of failed relationships and rejection have helped me realize I am happy being single. If I meet someone who can add value to my life, I would be open to asking them out, but I am not actively looking for that. Story 11. I don't. There comes a point when rejection becomes such a heavy burden that I can't continue trying. I received the message. Story 12. No. Higher standards, less time. I used to send out invitations for dates casually, and it didn't take much. A pretty face, an attractive figure, a great laugh, or an interesting hobby would catch my interest. If they had one thing that appealed to me, I would take my chance. Now I am much more selective, waiting until I see significant qualities that stand out. She has to meet multiple criteria for me to invest my time. Story 13. No, I had it drummed into me as a kid to leave women alone, so I never approached before turning 30. After 30, it's no different. Story 14. I never approached them then, and I don't now. In fact, I go one better by rarely going to the kind of places where I would even be in a position to do that in the first place. Story 15. I'm comfortable in my home, accompanied by solitude. No one rejects me here. No one judges me here, except for my harshest critic and my worst enemy. I'm referring to the person who haunts my mirrors. Story 16. I used to approach women significantly more often when I was under 30. Story 17. I have had numerous negative experiences with women who lack gratitude and consideration, believing that a man should build everything around their desires. Many modern women seem self-centered, prioritizing their own needs. It's often not worth the effort. I tried to engage in relationships during my 20s and 30s, and while I had success with many attractive women, their negative attitudes eventually became overwhelming. I struggle to understand how anyone can spend more than a few hours with a modern woman. Story 18. I never approached any woman, and I have no intentions of doing so. Now, we have laws that can send men to jail for such actions. If you approach an unstable woman, she can ruin your life. Story 19. In my teens, I approached girls occasionally if the conditions felt right or if friends pressured me to make a move. In my 20s, I only approached women on rare occasions when I thought I had a decent chance. In my 30s, I stopped approaching women altogether. In my 40s, I began actively avoiding women I found attractive due to the fear of being perceived as awkward or creepy. Story 20. Women have made it clear that they do not want to be approached by men. Why would I approach someone who dislikes me and considers my attention unwelcome? Why would I risk social and legal consequences for a chance at bringing someone who does not wish to interact with me into my life? Even if I succeed, I lose. There is nothing to be gained from approaching women anymore. It is all downside. Even the reward feels like a punishment. Story 21. I never approached them because they were too busy chasing the popular bad boy types. Now I feel that if I try to do it, I will just be the guy they settle for, leading to a dull relationship. Story 22. I don't find that the ones I meet are ever the right type for me. However, at a party, I introduce myself to most people, gauge the crowd, and wait for someone who makes a similar approach. Often, it's someone who also seems to be feeling out the crowd. These encounters tend to lead to meaningful connections based on shared interests. Cold approaching women is something I have never been good at, nor has it been effective for me. Story 23. Now that I am approaching my late 30s, I understand what I want in a woman. There is a 99% chance that a random woman does not fit that description. Even if I am interested in something casual, there is still a 99% chance that a random woman is not capable of managing a casual relationship in the way I desire. It is quite liberating to know what I want and to understand the importance of patience. Story 24. I no longer approach women, likely due to my lack of dating experience at this age. I only see cons to dating with no pros. Story 25. I stopped approaching women. I have had many experiences with both older and younger women. Their behavior is often similar, with a lack of effort and an expectation to be treated like a queen without reciprocating. I know one thing: the person meant for me will not miss me and vice versa. Instead of chasing, focus on going to the gym, improving your career, and leading a happy life. Women should be considered as side quests, not the main priority, because when you are down, many people may walk away from you as a man. Story 26. They reposted this thread on Ask Women, and they all agreed they do not want men to approach them. Everyone here knows it best. Women in this modern era dislike being approached by over 99% of men. Times have changed. Online interactions and friendships are now the primary ways to meet women. Story 27. Back then, most people were single. Now, it's difficult to know if someone is single, and if you approach them and they reject you with an excuse, you may never know if they were being honest. It's better to just avoid the situation and wait patiently for a miracle to happen. Story 28. Not a chance. Culture has completely changed in the last 20 years. Cold approaches are no longer common. Social media, videos, the Me Too movement, and ongoing gossip groups have contributed to this shift. I cannot think of anyone in my friend circle who has met through a cold approach. Story 29. In person? No, I didn't even do that in my 20s. I wasn't going to date a woman in the state I am currently living in. Story 30. No, age has made me significantly less tolerant of the hypocrisy, double standards, entitlement, and inflated sense of self-worth that many modern women unfortunately possess. Story 31. I used to approach people daily when I was younger. Now I feel things have changed. Women seem to be less receptive to being approached. My main goal in life is not to seek romantic relationships. That's more of a side quest. If it happens, great, but if it doesn't, I'll be okay. I'm at the point where I prefer to let things happen naturally, even if it takes longer. Story 32. I had a few long-term girlfriends, and they were all unfaithful and manipulative. When I realized that I had a pattern rather than a specific type, I decided to give up. Story 33. I feel like I approach them more now than before. That 30-year-old confidence of still having it. I won't go out of my way, but if the opportunity presents itself, we will see what can come from it. Story 34. Far less, actually. I really don't need to be reminded anymore that I'm not as cheerful as Fat Albert. Why continue doing something that doesn't work? Story 35. I rarely approach others, and it's becoming more challenging because I dislike certain attitudes. If a girl does not reciprocate my energy, I quickly become bored and disinterested. Story 36. No, for a handful of reasons. First, at this point in my life, I would rather be selfish with my time and money. Second, I am 37 years old, and it is impossible to tell how old girls are anymore. More often than not, I catch myself thinking, I am way too old for her. Third, my divorce affected me negatively, which emphasizes the first point. Story 37. I rarely approached in my younger days, and I rarely approach today. Story 38. No, not even close. Part of it is the liability. There is an even greater risk that the consequences will be far out of proportion to the approach. Also, I no longer have anything to prove. Therefore, I can be happy and single. If one compiles a list of times and places women have said they do not want to be approached, there is nothing left. They have expressed a desire to be left alone. I might as well oblige them. Story 39. No one approaches women anymore. I think about 50% of men aged 18 to 25 have never approached a woman. Story 40. I don't understand why anyone would approach a random stranger in public to flirt. Feels like harassment. It's different if you are in a social setting or participating in the same activity, but walking up to people who are just going about their daily routines feels weird. It would annoy me, too, if people did that. Story 41. Women are much easier to understand after they turn 25. Back in my university days, it often took until the next day to engage with them. In the office, it has become quite common to socialize with them during lunch. There are always many single women to meet at work and in general. It's not that they want to be single and lonely, unless they have specific lifestyle choices. Story 42. I do it much more often now. I feel that women over 30, and especially those over 40, are much more approachable. I am also much more of a catch now than I was in my 20s. I have learned to approach women, and it is really fun. Being flirty can be an enjoyable lifestyle. Story 43. Nobody cares anymore. Sex is readily available in many forms and costs about as much as a night out at the bar. Adult content is free, and strip clubs are easily accessible. Western women have contributed to their own situation, especially over the last 10 years, by positioning themselves at the forefront of the oppressed narrative and attacking others, despite their own involvement. Now they suggest it is unacceptable to ask them out on a date, so enjoy your 5 cats. Story 44. I was always the one approached, not the other way around. I was told that I am very approachable. Now it would feel strange if I did the approaching. Story 45. Somehow, the focus has shifted to women approaching. However, based on my own experience, the traditional way of men approaching tends to work better for a proper connection. My wife would not have approached me. Story 46. Yes, but it is much more selective. At the very least, it's a friendly conversation with a stranger, or I get a number if it feels worthwhile. Story 47. Definitely much less. Aside from intimacy, I have yet to find a woman who was a true companion. Often, I found myself giving up my hobbies to fulfill her need for attention. The first few months of the relationship were okay, but eventually, I missed my old single lifestyle. Many times, I also realized she had been dishonest about her hobbies at the beginning and that we had very little in common. Story 48. Approaching women can be challenging for me due to my social awkwardness. The stereotype of men bothering women in public places makes me hesitant to initiate conversations. All of my meaningful interactions with women, whether platonic friendships, situationships, or romantic relationships, have occurred through dating apps, work, or mutual friends. Story 49. I approached women more often back then, even though I am still single. Frankly, there are fewer women today that I find worthy of approaching. Story 50. Many times, My attempts to approach women in my 20s were driven by pressure and the desire not to appear cowardly in front of my friends. At that time, I had higher testosterone levels and was less concerned about rejections. I am married now, but even if I were single today, I don't think I would have the courage to approach women anymore. Unless, of course, I had my best friends encouraging each other to do so. Story 51. I am 26, almost 27, and I went through a phase where I gained weight and felt depressed for 4 years, during which I had no support. For the past 7 months, I have focused heavily on self-improvement and goal setting. In recent months, I finally gained the confidence to approach a few women, as I do not prefer dating apps and I had moderate success. Out of about 14 women I approached, mostly at the gym and a few at a cafe, I secured 1 coffee date and 1 recent girlfriend. Most of the women I met were already in relationships. Story 52. When I was single in my 30s, it was completely different because of how dating has changed. In the past, you had to meet a girl in person, and now you can simply go online. Interaction in person versus online is quite different for many reasons. I also gained a lot more confidence as I aged, so yes, it differs. Story 53. Not a lot, but much more than when I was younger, which was none. I am much more confident and no longer fear rejection. Story 54. By now you have learned that the worst that can happen is she tells you to leave or marries you, depending on how you look at it. Story 55. I have never had to approach anyone. It occurs naturally during normal conversations, such as asking for directions. Story 56. The older I get, the more they approach me because I still don't approach them. Granted, it's only once every few months, but that is more than 0 throughout my 20s. Story 57. Before I met my wife, I used dating apps. There are actually good women on those platforms, but you have to sift through a lot of unworthy profiles to find a suitable match, so it is not for the impatient. Story 58. I stopped approaching women because it never worked. I also don't like the apps, so I'm planning on just staying single, to be honest. Story 59. I was never one for approaching random women when I was younger, and that remains unchanged. My attempts at more organic connections never went well, so I can't imagine generating interest from a total stranger. I can't expect to hit a 3-pointer if I can't even make a layup. Story 60. No, but I am approached more often. In my 20s, I was desperate, and that was not attractive. I have had more success in my late 20s and early 30s. My nonchalant attitude and focus on my responsibilities seem appealing to younger women. Just live a good life. Women will want to be part of it. Story 61. I am more selective about whom I approach nowadays. When I was younger, I didn't think much about getting rejected, and I could easily handle rejection and continue having fun. Now, I meet women at events or while enjoying my hobbies, and I take a slow approach to getting to know them. I can find someone attractive and be fine being their friend, while with others I may choose to pursue dating, but I am not in a rush. Story 62. I have never approached anyone. I do have social anxiety, but I never understood how to initiate a conversation. I meet women the same way I always have, either online, through work, or at social events. I don't date as much as I used to, mainly due to personal choices. Story 63. Less than I used to, not that I ever did much earlier either. Why? Probably not as motivated and also fewer opportunities. Story 64. I'm not interested. At 21 to 28 years old, I cared about the challenge, the experience, and the final reward. At 43, I don't care about any of that. Feels like a waste of time, effort, and money. Hire a professional and enjoy a meal afterward. Takes less time and effort, costs about the same, and achieves the same outcome. Story 65. I am 31 years old and single, but I have been divorced and have 2 children. My dating life is non-existent. I have tried to focus on myself and my sons. I have made friends and developed feelings for a few women over the past 3 years. But as soon as they find out I have kids, it's a hard no. That's a double-edged sword because I feel hurt that my children are viewed as a negative aspect. At the same time, I would never date someone who wouldn't make an effort to at least know them. My children do not need a second mother. They already have a great one. However, I would love to have someone to talk with and share experiences. Story 66. As a man in my mid-30s, I have gained confidence that I didn't have in my teens or 20s. I have learned how to manage my emotions and found environments where I fit in. I approach women much more now, and while I still experience disappointment and emotional struggles, I accept it and move on. Story 67. No, without the forced socialization of high school and college, I now barely know anyone, let alone women, especially single women. Story 68. They weren't interested when I was younger and still do not appear to be interested, which is nice because that would be really insulting. My anxiety prevents me from being able to do it anyway. Story 69. I have never felt attractive. Being unattractive has its advantages. In my experience, there was always someone better around me. I get to enjoy my paid-off home, eat my snacks, and pursue my hobbies without complaints. I even fold towels and clothes without any issues. It's a good life. However, my wrist seems to always be sore. Go figure. Story 70. I am 31 years old and I approach more women now than ever before. I spent most of my 20s in relationships and was not comfortable approaching women when I was single. Now I just go for it. Story 71. In my younger years, I used to approach women often. My first 4 relationships came from this. However, as I have gotten older and established my career, I have become wary of risking what I have. I have also observed the current gender dynamics and no longer approach women in real life unless at a small gathering where I know there is mutual interest. Additionally, I have found success with online dating and the apps, which alleviates the need to approach women in person. Still, I occasionally feel insecure about it, even if it risks being perceived as inappropriate. Story 72. Bold of you to assume I have ever approached strangers in general and women in particular. I learned from a young age that I don't fit in anywhere. Story 73. Not as much. My risk level has shifted. However, I often do not approach them because if I do, I will just want to talk, but they may want more or think I want more. Story 74. I would say I approach women more now. Time is running out. Approaching a woman is much easier than it was in my 20s. Story 75. I got a job that forces me into uncomfortable social situations every day. Selling her my experience is no different than selling her a car. Story 76. Nowadays, I feel more confident in who I am. So far, this has led me to connect with some interesting individuals. Story 77. I had a promiscuous past which led to contracting herpes simplex virus type 2. From that point, I approached women differently, making sure to be upfront and honest, unlike my previous experiences. The rejection I faced was tough, and as a result, I became less interested in approaching women, as being rejected because of my status made things feel worse. Nonetheless, I respect their decisions. I was in a long-term relationship for 3 to 4 years. After that, my willingness to interact with women changed. While I still use dating apps, I am also content being alone. Eventually, I entered another long-term relationship which started while playing video games. I moved her in with me, and it was an interesting experience, but that relationship ended a couple of months ago after 2 years. I learned a lot from it, and I'm about to turn 31 in a few weeks. I am currently navigating dating apps, but I am taking things much slower. I am focusing on self-evaluation and ensuring my happiness. I also need to get back in shape and build my confidence. With the new World of Warcraft expansion dropping this week, who knows, maybe I will meet someone new there too. Story 78. No, because at 38, I am not often in social situations where it is expected or acceptable to approach women. Additionally, I check for rings on their fingers, which is a clear indication to me not to pursue. Most importantly, I know many women who express a desire to be left alone while going about their activities, and I have taken that to heart. I still try to be friendly and sociable, but I almost never approach in the way you mean. Story 79. Unfortunately, as my health has slightly declined, so has my appearance. I'm afraid of talking to them for fear of being labeled as a creep or receiving a negative reaction. Story 80. I'm not an extreme risk taker, so no. As an older man, I recall a time when you could approach a woman in a bar, have a friendly conversation, buy her a drink, and everything would be pleasant for both parties. If she wasn't interested, she would simply say no thanks. and everyone would move on without drama. This system offered protection to women because, back then, if a woman felt uncomfortable, she could turn to any man nearby and say, "This guy is making me uncomfortable," and the other men would swiftly remove him from the situation. Those days are not returning anytime soon. Story 81. Dating applications mean you don't have to waste time and effort approaching people in real life. On an application, you know they are single, interested, can communicate effectively, and you can see their age and whether they have kids. You can ask them yes, no, maybe with a click of a button. Story 82. I approach more. There's no pressure. Sometimes you have an interesting conversation and wish each other luck. Sometimes she is underneath you while your best friend is struggling to fit in. We perhaps should have swapped. Story 83. I'm glad that people provided you with diverse answers. I got divorced in my 30s. I noticed some men have hang-ups about women, and while I also picked up some negativity, it was directed at certain types of women. I only approached women I knew or those from backgrounds where I could expect better results. It was great because I have a large international social circle. I have no real horror stories unless you count the incident with a Chinese girl who caused trouble for innocent people in Bali. Even so, that was a memorable time. To get to the heart of what you're probably looking for, I ended up marrying a woman who approached me. My assistant came into my office and told me she was interested. It was adorable, and since I already knew her well, it was very easy. She's currently putting away dishes while I make pancakes for our children. Story 84. I feel more confident now than I did when I was younger. I have had enough positive dating experiences to know for certain that I am a handsome man with a good personality. Most women, if they are available, would be open to getting to know me if I make it easy for them. When you combine confidence with being outgoing and also give yourself time to refine your social skills, you cannot lose. Story 85. I approach women quite often now. In my 20s, I probably approached 2 to 3 girls during that entire decade. I was afraid and lacked confidence. I made excuses to justify my fear, telling myself I didn't want to bother them, they probably had a boyfriend, or that I didn't want to make a scene or embarrass myself. But the truth was that I was just afraid to do it. It's intimidating to put yourself out there in person. Facing rejection head-on is something many people avoid, but it must be done. I started approaching women, and it was surprising how much success I had. Many girls expressed how much they appreciated being approached in person and asked out, and how they had gone years without anyone approaching them. Interestingly, the more attractive the woman, the less likely she is to be approached. I experienced the most success with asking out the prettier women. All the excuses and online myths about why not to ask a girl out are just that nonsense. Story 86. A woman is not a strange creature from another planet. My intention when I am by myself is to go somewhere like a comedy show, meet people after the show and talk to them, or during the interval if there is one. I am not playing games. I will talk to anyone to meet new friends and make genuine connections. So yes, I will approach women, and I have ended up being good friends with a lot of them. I will talk to the guys as well because that is how you make friends when you are older. Yes, it has happened before that a friendship turned into something more, but that was never my intention. Life just works out that way. I still talk to about 70% of my ex-girlfriends from time to time, except the ones that are married or about to be, because you do not want your wife talking to her ex. It is just about respect. For example, I was at a sports game where you had to stand and watch because all the seating was taken. While I was standing, I noticed a woman in an insecure posture. I waited for maybe 30 minutes, guessing that someone must have ditched her. Since she was quite close to me, I moved over a bit and asked her which team she was going to cheer for. From there, we started talking, laughing, and now we play card games in cafes all the time and have our own inside jokes. She told me she was really happy that I came and talked to her because she was genuinely alone and did not have anyone to see the game with her. This is not a one-off, by the way. She looked lonely and insecure, so I approached her to make her feel better, not to hook up with her. That is how friendships are born. Think with good intentions, not sexual ones, and you can meet people from all walks of life, forming solid friendships and connections no matter where you go and what you do. But if I walk up to someone just to talk and they act stuck up or think I am hitting on them, starting to play hard to get, they have the wrong idea. I usually say, "Oh, I just wanted to have a good conversation with someone, and you looked like an interesting person. I am not hitting on you, but I got your message, and I will be moving on now." Two things then happen. They will either stare at me with a blank expression or say something nice and invite me to sit with them. If they are playing hard to get, it means that from the moment they met you, they were already playing games, so you do not want to date someone who plays games in the first place. You will discover who they really are. Sometimes they just have a boyfriend and do not want to talk to another man or are simply stressed out. You need to have a proper conversation to find out who they really are. As I said, approach with good intentions, and you will find yourself making deep and true connections. Story 87. I'm not an expert, but I am saddened to see so many people lacking confidence. I'm a bigger guy in my 30s and have never had trouble getting dates. Even as a kid, I've never been single for more than a few months. Approaching women has always been a situation where most say no, but once you get past the feeling of rejection, you just give it a try, and if they're not interested, you respectfully move on. Try not to randomly approach a total stranger. Instead, form some kind of connection, even if it's just chatting for 20 minutes, before making your move. It's all about personality and respect, and as long as you're an average-looking guy who takes care of himself, you're already ahead of 60% of men. If you have tact, a woman is not going to be upset if you ask her to grab a coffee. Avoid coming on too strong. Instead of asking, "Do you want to go on a date with me?" Take a more casual approach. Understand that women often feel the need to say they do not want to be approached because, before they ever had a chance to date, many grown men have acted inappropriately towards them. They have experienced things like catcalling since middle school or receiving unwanted messages online. They rarely get a break from this. Many guys who approach women can be too forward at times. Be casual, be friendly, make them feel comfortable around you, and never expect anything in return for your kindness. There are 7 billion people in the world. You will eventually connect with someone, and it will be worth it. Story 88. Many of you seem disheartened and apprehensive about life, resembling individuals who are excessively withdrawn. It's time to step outside your comfort zone and embrace life a bit more. Story 89. I was focused on making money when I was younger, and I am probably even more focused on it now. However, I still find it amusing how some comments can be a bit sad. It seems like there's a fear of women in those responses, and I expect there will be some negative reactions to that observation. Story 90. This community is filled with unhappy individuals. It's important to go out and socialize. Ask the cashier how their day is going or request someone's contact information. If they decline, move on. If they agree, that's great. It's surprising to see how much negativity surrounds socializing. It's akin to having to remind others that not all women are the same. The group mentality here is striking. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.